The rain hit the concrete like tiny hammers the morning Ellie Walker showed up at Hunter Automotive, drenched in oil-stained jeans and carrying a toolbox almost as big as her. The 19-year-old mechanic's daughter stood at the edge of the service bay, eyes locked on the lifeless hulk of the engine that had bested every expert in the shop. "You're telling me she wants to take a shot?" barked Garrett Hunter, the no-nonsense CEO of the multi-million-dollar auto design firm. "That thing's been dead for months. Top engineers gave up. But sure, let the kid have her moment." The men around him chuckled, the sound heavy with doubt, but Ellie didn't flinch. She wasn't here to prove them wrong. She was here because her father, Mike Walker, the shop's former lead mechanic, had spent his final days believing this engine could change the world. He called it the Pulse, a prototype that ran cleaner, faster and cheaper than anything before it. He died of cancer 2 months earlier, his notes buried in a greasy, spiral-bound notebook no one bothered to read. No one except Ellie. Garrett waved dismissively. "Fine, you've got 1 hour. When it doesn't work, you walk away, and that's the end of this joke." Ellie gave a quiet nod, opened the hood and rolled up her sleeves. "Sir." What the suits watching didn't know was this. Ellie had spent years beside her father, watching, listening. While others dismissed Mike's ideas as old school or idealistic, Ellie saw the patterns. She felt the heartbeat of machines the way a musician hears melodies in noise. As the men scoffed from the sidelines, she began disassembling the engine's core module. It wasn't just about parts, it was about trust. Her dad always said machines tell you what's wrong if you're willing to listen. And Ellie? She'd been listening her whole life. "Why is she pulling the capacitor?" one engineer whispered. "Because it's not the problem," she muttered under her breath. "The problem is the ground loop that no one cared to trace." With nimble fingers, she adjusted wiring, rewired circuits, and replaced one tiny, overlooked resistor, a part her father had hand-soldered himself. The room fell into a hush as she stepped back. "Try it now." One of the engineers hesitated, then turned the key. The engine roared to life, smooth, quiet, powerful. Gasps filled the shop. Garrett's jaw dropped. How did you—" Ellie held up the dog-eared notebook, now flecked with grease and smudged ink. "You all looked at his drawings like he was dreaming, but he was solving a puzzle you didn't even see." "Sir." A silence fell, not the awkward kind, but reverent. What began as a mockery turned into a reckoning. Garrett stepped forward, eyes uncharacteristically soft. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Your father, he was ahead of his time." Ellie smiled, tears glistening but not falling. He wasn't trying to be ahead. He was just trying to help. He believed everyone deserved better, cleaner engines, affordable energy. He believed in people. Suddenly, it wasn't just about a fixed machine. It was about a legacy. Garrett looked around the room. "We're reviving the Pulse project," he said, voice firm, "and I want you to lead the team, Ellie." Shock flickered across her face. "Me?" "You've got what the rest of us forgot, heart and vision." Sir. Months later, the first Pulse engine-powered vehicle rolled off the line, clean, efficient, and affordable. A tribute to the late Mike Walker and the daughter who dared to believe in his dream. But the true legacy wasn't just in the tech. It was in the way a room full of skeptics learned to listen. It was in the way Garrett Hunter, a hardened CEO, quietly funded scholarships for young inventors like Ellie, and in how Ellie herself mentored a new generation, teaching them to listen not just to machines, but to the people behind them. Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, like believing in someone, spark the biggest revolutions. And sometimes the impossible isn't a challenge. It's just waiting for someone brave enough to try. The launch day was over, but Ellie couldn't sleep. She stood in the quiet of the garage, now her innovation lab, watching the Pulse engine hum on the test bench. The same place that once echoed with laughter and late-night brainstorming with her father now resonated with purpose and hope. A knock echoed. It was Jordan, a high school student from the mentorship program Ellie had started. He was holding a carburetor and a nervous smile. I tried the airflow mod like you showed me, but it's still misfiring. Ellie grinned. Then we figure it out together. They leaned over the table, heads bent in focus. This wasn't about parts. It was about patience, about passing on what her father gave her, time, trust, and belief. In the months that followed, Ellie's lab became a sanctuary for young dreamers. Some came from tough neighborhoods, others from foster care or refugee families. But here, they were all engineers in the making. Garrett, once hardened by business, now visited weekly, not to control, but to learn. He funded scholarships in Mike Walker's name, and he listened more than he talked. One day, Ellie hosted a town open house. Media, parents, teachers, and curious locals came to see what the Pulse Project had become. Near the end, a woman stepped forward, gray-haired, worn hands, soft voice. "I just wanted to say, my son talks about engines now, says they're like puzzles. You gave him that, thank you." Ellie's eyes welled up. "Your son gave that to himself. I just reminded him he could." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ellie stood outside the lab. She looked up at the stars, the same way her dad used to when he spoke of the future. She remembered his words. "Kindness is the best fuel, kid. Never runs out, powers more than engines ever will." And as the wind whispered through the trees, Ellie smiled. The impossible had been fixed. The dream had taken root, and a new generation was ready to build a world powered not just by innovation, but by heart.